question. And we now come to statement Minister David Johnston. After this.
With permission, Madam Deputy Speaker, I will now make a statement on the successful first stage of the largest ever expansion of childcare in England's history being made by this government. This government has a strong track record of supporting parents with the cost of childcare, supporting disadvantaged children and ensuring that childcare is high quality, with 96% of early years settings rated good or outstanding by Ofsted. In 2010, we extended the 3- and 4-year-old entitlement, commonly taken as 15 hours a week for 38 weeks of the year. In 2013, we introduced 15 hours of free early education a week for disadvantaged 2-year-olds. In 2017, the 3- and 4-year-old entitlement was doubled to 30 hours per week for working parents. And in March 2023, recognising that childcare is one of the biggest costs facing working families today, my right honourable friend, the Chancellor, announced the biggest investment by a UK government into childcare in history, so that by September 2025, working parents will be able to access 30 hours free childcare per week from when their children are 9 months old until they start school. By the time this expansion is complete, parents using the full 30 hours can expect to save £6,900 a year on average, a hugely significant saving for their family finances. We are staggering the expansion to ensure there are the staff and places available to meet parental demand. And this month marked the first stage of the rollout, with eligible working parents now able to receive 15 hours of government-funded childcare for their 2-year-olds for the first time. Last month, my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Education, informed the House that we expected 150,000 children to be benefiting from this from the beginning of this month. As we set out in our official statistical report, 195,355 parents were in fact benefiting from this on the 17th of April, and we have subsequently broken the 200,000 mark. We will publish further official statistical reports in due course. As members of the House will know, the system involves parents applying for a code that they then take to a provider to validate in order to obtain a place. The first phase of the rollout is showing a similar trajectory to our last expansion of childcare in 2017. On the 5th of September 2017, 71% of codes had been validated. As of the 17th of April this year, 79% of codes issued had been validated by providers. And again, we have broken 81% as of this week. With every rollout, some eligibility codes go unused for a variety of reasons, such as parents changing their mind about formal childcare or being issued a code automatically, even though they didn't need one. For our well-established offer for 3- and 4-year-olds, around 12% of codes are not validated. But as with previous rollouts, we expect the number of children benefiting from this new entitlement and the number of codes validated to grow in the coming weeks and months. As in 2017, no local authority is reporting they do not have sufficient places to meet demand. And I'd like to pay tribute to early years providers, local authorities, membership bodies, and other key stakeholders who've worked closely with us to ensure the first phase of the rollout was successful and that parents could access places. We will continue to work closely with them for the next phases of the rollout. The next phase begins in September. Parents will be able to start applying for 15 hours of childcare for their 9-month-olds from the 12th of May, ready to receive these in September. I'm also delighted to announce that parents on parental leave or who are starting a new job in September will be able to apply for a childcare place from the 12th of May instead of waiting until 31 days before their first day of work, as has been the case until now. Delivering such a large expansion requires more staff and more childcare places. By September 2024, we estimate that we need 15,000 more places and 9,000 more staff. For September 2025, which is the largest phase of the rollout, we estimate that a further 70,000 places and 31,000 staff will then be needed. Last year, the number of childcare places increased by around 15,000 and the number of staff by around 13,000, even before the rollout began and before the significant steps the government is taking to increase capacity within the sector, beginning with rates. Now, the Institute for Fiscal Studies has independently confirmed that funding for the new 2-year-old entitlement is significantly higher than average parent-paid fees. According to the government's Provider Pulse survey published last week, the largest barrier identified by the sector, 45% of respondents, to expanding their provision was future funding certainty, a message I have heard clearly from the many providers I have visited in recent months. That is why at the 2024 budget, the Chancellor committed to ensuring that future funding rates for all entitlements will increase by the measure used last year in the 2025-26 and 2026-27 financial years. This estimated £500 million of additional funding over those 2 years will provide a level of certainty which we are confident will help to unlock tens of millions of pounds in private sector investment, ensure that rates keep up with provider cost pressures, and will give providers greater opportunity to increase staff pay. To support recruitment into the sector, this year we launched a £6.5 million recruitment campaign, Do Something Big, Work with Small Children. Thousands of people are visiting the recruitment campaign website every week to find out more about the great early year and childcare careers available. In January, we introduced changes to the early years foundation stage to give providers greater flexibilities to attract and retain staff. And yesterday, we launched a technical consultation setting out the department's proposals for how a new experience-based route for early years staff who've got relevant experience from other sectors but do not have the required full and relevant qualifications we require could work. Finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, due to the falling birth rate over recent years, some primary schools have school space they are no longer using, and in some cases, primary schools have closed entirely. In order to support our expansion of childcare, we've launched a new pilot to explore how some of the unused school space could be repurposed to support childcare settings to offer more places. If the pilot is a success, the government will roll this out more widely. Our progress delivering this transformative expansion to early education and childcare underscores this government's unwavering dedication to empowering families, supporting the childcare sector and building a prosperous future. I look forward to Labour welcoming this month's news and/or finally telling us what their plan for childcare is. And I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Minister Helen Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Minister for advance sight of his statement. With red lights flashing across the board, this is a weak attempt by the government to defend their bungled expansion of childcare provision. The opposition is absolutely clear in our commitment to building a modern childcare and early years education system, putting quality at the heart of our vision. We support the expanded entitlement, but there are serious questions about whether this government's plans are deliverable. Ever since the Chancellor's announcement in the 2023 budget, parents and the early years sector have been crying out for a detailed and credible plan for the rollout of the expansion. But the government has consistently dismissed concerns and acted as if there were no problems, when the problems are clear to see. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, today's statement is yet another desperate attempt by the government to avoid scrutiny of their childcare plans, coming just hours before what we understand to be a highly critical report from the National Audit Office. It would have been far better if the Minister had come to the House following the publication of the National Audit Office report, so that honourable members could properly scrutinise his response to it. The Department's own modelling suggests an extra 85,000 childcare places and 40,000 additional full-time equivalent staff will be needed by September 2025. This is a huge challenge when providers across the country are already struggling to recruit the skilled staff they need, and many are on the brink of closure. The Department's recently published Pulse survey, the same survey that the Minister is quoting in aid, found 2/3 of all group-based providers and staff of school-based providers were continuing to experience staffing problems, with little change since 2022. 9 in 10 providers responding to the survey have either reduced or kept the same number of places they offered in the last year. Similarly, data from Ofsted shows that in the 6 months following the Chancellor's original announcement, childcare places actually fell by more than 1,000. How can the Minister credibly claim that everything is on track when this is the feedback from the sector? Quorum's annual survey of childcare providers is also clear about the government's failure. Just 28% of local authorities are confident they will have enough places for the expansion to children from the age of 9 months. That is almost 3/4 of communities where parents will not be able to access the childcare the government has promised. Across every age group and category, Quorum found a fall in the number of local authorities able to deliver sufficient childcare in their local area. 87% of areas saw the workforce crisis as the biggest barrier to the expansion, but there is still no detailed workforce plan from the government. And just 6% of areas are confident that they will have sufficient childcare for disabled children, a truly shameful failure. We need a serious plan to ensure childcare expansion is a success for children, parents and providers. The opposition are clear that we will be led by the evidence. That is why we have commissioned Sir David Bell to review the current challenges facing the sector and inform our plans for the future. So I ask the Minister, how many codes which his department have issued as part of the April expansion have translated into provision of an actual childcare place? Where is the additional £500 million of investment announced in the budget being funded from, and what is being cut to provide this funding? What urgent discussions is he having with the early years sector about the impact of the April expansion on their financial sustainability? And will he guarantee today that every family will be able to access a childcare place following the planned further expansion in September? Yes or no? Madam Deputy Speaker, children's voices are not heard often enough in this place. So on their behalf, I warn ministers opposite. Childcare and early education is too important to be put at risk by the mess they are making. The issue today is not simply about places or the staff in our nurseries, nor even about work choices for parents, but about life chances for our children. Ministers must, for the sake of all our children, get a plan in place now.
Well, I didn't hear a plan there, Madam Deputy Speaker. That was not her job, says the shadow spokesperson. With the general election later this month, it's not her job to have a plan. The staffing have gone up. Staffing has gone up by 13,000 people before we even started this expansion. And our winter survey showed that in terms of applications for vacancies at group-based providers, it gone up from 2 to 1 for each vacancy to 5 to 1 for each vacancy as of the end of last year. I didn't entirely hear her question. I think she asked how many places or children had been receiving something as a result of this expansion. I think that was the case. If it wasn't, I'll write to her. That's 200,000 and counting. We expect the number to go up in the coming weeks and months, as it has with other expansions. The funding for the 25-26 and 26-27 increases to rates will come from day-to-day spending. The April expansion is the point at which providers will see a significant increase in their rates. An increase which, by the way, is £4 more per hour than parents are currently paying for under 2 provision. That's a significant increase in the rates that are being provided. And just as I was confident about the April rollout, despite all the noise and sniping from the benches opposite, which has now been delivered, I am confident about the September rollout too. But my final point is this. The Shadow Secretary of State has said that the hours model has failed, and that we should move away from the hours model. She said that she would have a childcare plan that would be like the creation of the NHS. And nobody knew what that meant, and 15 months later it seems neither did she, because she's had to ask somebody to write a plan for her instead. The truth is that while this Conservative government has just successfully delivered the first stage of its childcare expansion, which 200,000 parents are benefiting from, Labour still have no plan, no policy and no idea how to help families with childcare.
Chair of the Education Select Committee, Robin Walk.
Thank you, Dame Rosie. There's much in this statement to be welcomed. The Education Select Committee welcomed an expansion of childcare, broadening the offer, and an increase in funding for the funded hours, and this delivers on some of that. Clearly, it's an early success story, but clearly there is, as the opposition have raised, serious risk as it expands exponentially over the coming years. In order to address that risk, my honourable friend needs to secure more funding and he needs to secure more places. 13,000 places is a welcome start, and more staff in the sector is also vitally important. But can he assure me that on top of the very welcome £500 million that was secured at the spending review, he will keep making the case, keep listening to the providers around the funding they need to keep moving this forward? And can he ensure that the same quantum of increase is there for the under 2-year-olds as there is for the 2-year-olds compared to what is currently getting paid in the private sector?
Can I thank my right honourable friend for raising some very important issues? He is right that certainty and increasing those rates has been one of the most important things that the sector has asked for, and it was very warmly received that we were providing that certainty in the 25, 26 and 26, 27 years, which, by the way, we think will help them, according to various reports that have been done, unlock now private sector investment and capital to help them expand, because that was the biggest thing they felt that might be holding that back. It is part of a doubling of the amount that we're spending on childcare from 4 billion to 8 billion a year. And I will continue to work with him on making sure that we address the needs that the sector has.
Stella Creasy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I start by declaring an interest in this as a parent of a 2-year-old child. And as a parent, I think what all of us are talking about is the cost of childcare. And the Minister didn't address this cost because the surveys show us very clearly over half of all nurseries and preschools say that the money being provided doesn't cover the cost of providing this service in the way that the government is asking them to do. It doesn't take a rocket scientist or indeed a toddler to work out that somebody's got to pick up the bill. Now, the estimate before the government's new hours was that fees were going to rise by 8.5%. Every single parent of any child in a nursery in my local community who's come to me has said their fees have gone up as a direct result of this policy, because that's the way that nurseries are trying to stay open and make ends meet. So will the Minister prove me wrong? Will the Minister commit to publishing the data on the fees that parents of all children under 5 in nurseries and preschools are paying in this country pre and post the changes in hours?
Yeah.
Well, what we do is we have a survey of 6,000 parents and 9,000 providers to set our rates based on exactly what they're paying. And the Honourable Lady must have missed me saying that our rate for under 2s is more than £4 more per hour than what is being paid by parents privately. Now, I know that she doesn't like these facts because there are odds with her narrative. She asked me to prove her wrong. This month we've just done so.
Vicky Ford.
Thank you. The expansion of government-funded childcare is going to be a major benefit to many families in my Chelmsford constituency. So on the first day of the expansion, I went to visit Scallywags, one of the many outstanding childcare providers in my constituency. I was overwhelmed by how happy the children are, how loved they are. They would like to expand, but they rent premises from the local council, which is run by the Lib Dems, who wrote to me last night saying they will not give them more space to expand this amazing nursery. Is there any capital funding available to help nurseries expand?
Can I thank my honourable friend? That sounds like typical behaviour from a Lib Dem council. At the end of last year, we allocated £100 million in capital funding, which every local authority got some of, precisely to help providers like the one she's describing be able to expand, upgrade their buildings and so on. So I would take that answer back to her and see what they're doing with that money.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last year, 3,000 childminders left the sector, with the Early Years Alliance estimating that the current offer for 3- and 4-year-olds is underfunded by £1.8 billion. This is impacting hard-working parents, particularly in rural areas like those I represent. Amelia, a provider in Chelmsford, let me know that Devon gets just £5.20 of funding per hour for for the care of 3 to 4-year-olds, way below the rate in similar urban areas. So Westminster, for example, gets a rate of £8.17 per hour. What will the Minister do to address this imbalance and ensure that people struggling with the cost of childcare in rural areas are not shortchanged?
Well, what we've done, in September, we put in more than 200 million to increase rates. In April, we've put in a further 400 million to increase rates, in part to help providers meet the costs of the 9.7% increase in the national living wage that this government has made. So rates are going up. Specifically on childminders, we have been doing a few things. One, we have a childminder grant scheme to try and encourage more childminders into the sector. And we've also been consulting on things that would make their lives more easier, more flexible, allow them to be part of more networks, so that we can grow what is an important part of the childcare market.
Tim Lawton.
Deputy Speaker, to listen to the gloomsters opposite, you would think that childcare policy was a triumph under the last Labour government. In 2010, widespread funded childcare was just not a thing. And where the Labour government did provide subsidies, it was in schools latching on nurseries in direct competition to independent providers. So can I ask him, amongst the expansion, which I very much welcome, what is being done to help workplace providers, particularly in places like hospitals, where you have public service workers in short supply, working irregular hours, who can't necessarily use mainstream nurses? What is he also doing to try and encourage more men into the profession too?
My right honourable friend is absolutely right. We inherited families being able to get, some families being able to get 12 and a half hours of childcare. And thanks to this government's expansion, they will now be able to get 30 hours each week from when their children are 9 months old until they start school. He raises two very other important issues. One about people who work irregular patterns, and it is important to say we don't require the childcare pattern to be 9 to 3. We want that flexibility for those people who are working awkward hours, and to make it easier to have that provision in other settings. And he's entirely right about trying to encourage more men into the sector. In addition to our big recruitment campaign to just get more people into the sector, we've got a specific focus on trying to encourage more men as well.
Sarah Owen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. For all the Minister's glib responses, he has failed to address the fact that the children's organisation Quorum have said and reported that just 6% of local areas have sufficient childcare places for children with special educational needs and disabilities. So what is the Minister doing to ensure that all children with additional needs in constituencies like mine in Luton North are able to access childcare, and that providers have the staff, the resources and the space they need to do so?
I think the Honourable Lady hasn't listened to the content of any of the answers that I have given, but it is the case that we work with every local authority in the country. Local authorities have the statutory duty to ensure there are a number of places available, and we work with every local authority in the country to make sure they have sufficient places, including for children with special educational needs, and not a single local authority is reporting they do not have sufficient places.
Dame Maria Miller.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I very much welcome my honourable friend's statement, particularly because in Basingstoke, 2 and 3 of the parents that I have of 2-year-olds are already using childcare, so they're able to apply and benefit from this extra support. Could my honourable friend just talk a little bit more about how that will help get more of those give more of those parents the opportunity to get back into employment, which can be particularly important for us when we're looking at trying to address the gender pay gap?
My right honourable friend is absolutely right. One of the things that might happen with this expansion is that parents for the first time have childcare for their 2-year-olds. But the other thing that might happen is because they're able to claim 15 hours, they might increase the hours they were already paying for to relieve the pressure on their finances. And so she's absolutely right about the labour market impact of this. And the OBR said that 60,000 people they expected to enter the workforce, but 1.5 million to increase their hours as a result of being able to access this childcare, which is a huge benefit to the economy.
Claire Hannah.
Thank you
very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Childcare in Northern Ireland is in a critical condition, and we aren't even receiving these new changes, flawed as they may be. On Saturday, I joined thousands of parents on a march in Belfast demanding immediate intervention. £10,000 per child per year is far from unusual. The Northern Ireland Executive promised this would be a day one priority, but haven't delivered more than warm words. One interim solution could be raising the £2,000 tax-free limit, even just in line with inflationary pressures as applies to other benefits, and certainly for Northern Ireland parents who miss out on what the Minister has just outlined. Will he commit to exploring this with Treasury to, in his words, empower parents?
Well, the precise parameters for that are, of course, set by Treasury. But one thing we would like to do is see more people claim that tax-free childcare, because there are many people that could claim it that don't, both at that level, and of course you get double for children with SEND as well. And you can have that with the existing entitlements in England, which can further boost your finances. So that's something we're keen to encourage with people.
Greg Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. To declare an interest, my youngest son, Rupert, who's 2, enjoyed his first day at preschool last week under this scheme. And I know from talking to many other parents across my constituency just how transformational this expansion of the childcare offer is. However, with Buckinghamshire the natural and obvious place for people to want to move to bring their families up, I fear that demand may well outstrip supply soon, and we have those competing cost pressures, being a county that borders London, where when it comes to recruitment, the challenge of moving to an outer London borough to get London waiting to work is real. So can I ask my honourable friend, as he continues his superb work in ensuring we have that expansion in childcare provision, that counties like Buckinghamshire and others across the South East are given special consideration given those cost pressures?
Well, I'm delighted to hear that Rupert's been able to take advantage of this offer. He is right that in different parts of the country we see very different rates being required by providers based on the costs that they are facing. That's why our rates are different in different parts of the country, and local authorities have to pass through 95% of what we give to make sure as much of that goes to the provider as possible. But we will continue to make sure they're set based on what providers tell us they're actually having to pay to make sure they've got the money that they need.
Kerry McCarthy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm getting an increasing number of constituents come to me who are struggling to access the childcare they need when they need it, and that's partly exacerbated by staff shortages and sicknesses at overstretched providers. But the point I wanted to press the Minister on, he says in his statement that the estimated 500 million of additional funding will ensure that rates keep up with provider cost pressure. Can I ask him what modelling has been done to ensure that is the case, particularly with reference to places like Bristol, where we know a lot of their overheads will be higher than many other places outside London? And I don't expect him to have the figures at his disposal today, but will he promise to write to me to give me an assessment of what has been done in relation to Bristol?
Yes, I will. The projections for the 25, 26 and 26, 27 year are obviously based partly on economic conditions at the time, because they have a few factors that go into them that are going to determine what we make those rates. But I will write to her about specifically what has been happening in Bristol to date.
Jack Brereton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As a parent of a 20-month-old myself, I know this will be very much welcomed by many parents across Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire, and I know that many working families particularly, it will make a massive impact on them. But I do also know that there are challenges in getting the right place for your child. So will the Minister look at what more can be done to ensure that we support the sector as much as possible and expand those places in Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire?
My honourable friend is right. The key thing we are focused on is making sure that in every area of the country there are the places and staff available. Now, we've just shown this April that those are available because we've got 200,000 benefiting from this new entitlement, and everything we're doing in time for the next September rollout and the September after is pulling every lever to up recruitment, up rates, encourage more people into the sector, help people expand to make sure that provision is there.
Andrew Gwynn.
Thank you. I'll start on a consensual point because, look, it's not a bad thing that the government wants to extend early years and childcare provision. That's something that we all want to see and we want it to work. I want to question the Minister, though, because in his answer to my honourable friend, the member for Luton North, he said that there's not a single local authority that is telling him that there aren't sufficient places. Now, Coram are saying that they found 35% of local authorities reported to them that there was sufficient childcare for children under 2. That's a decrease of 29% since last year. Now, both statements can't be correct, so why does he think Coram thinks that in some local authorities there are insufficient places?
Well, I have seen those figures, and all I can tell the honourable gentleman, because a lot of these surveys are based on a measure of confidence taken at some point before the rollout. And all I can tell the honourable gentleman is that we work with those local authorities all the way up to that rollout in order to make sure they've got those places. And so sometimes when people say they're not confident, they turn out to be able to provide all those places. My point to the honourable lady and to him now is that as of the expansion we have just done for April, no local authority is reporting they don't have sufficient places. We will now work with all of them in order to get the next stage of that expansion for September, the first 15 hours for 9-month-olds and upwards, to make sure that is the case again.
I thank the Minister for his statement.